Welcome to The Nameless. This story is not for everyone, but if you're still here, take a deep breath. Let's begin. The walls sound alive when I turn off the lights. It's not a creak, and it's not the settling of old timber. It is a low, rhythmic thrumming, like a massive generator buried deep beneath the earth, or the purring of a colossal animal sleeping inside the drywall. I know how crazy that sounds. Believe me, I've tried to rationalize it every way I can. But physics doesn't explain why the sound stops the moment I reach for the light switch, or why the vibration feels like it's syncing up with my own heartbeat. It's been 3 years since I walked out of that house, and I still sleep with a fan on. I need the white noise. If the room gets too quiet, my brain starts filling in the silence with that hum, and I'm right back there in the dark, waiting for the walls to breathe. I bought the place in late October. It was a 2-story Craftsman on the edge of town, the kind of property that usually gets snatched up by developers within a week. But this one had been sitting on the market for 8 months. The price kept dropping. By the time I saw the listing, it was almost suspiciously cheap. I asked the realtor if there was structural damage or a lien on the title. She just shook her head, looking more tired than relieved that someone was finally interested. She told me the previous owner, an elderly man, had passed away in his sleep. Natural causes, she said, tapping her pen against her clipboard. The house is solid. It just needs fresh energy. I was 26, working a remote IT job, and desperate to get out of my cramped apartment complex where the neighbors argued through paper-thin walls until 3 a.m. I walked through the house once. It smelled of cedar and old dust, but the floors were hardwood and the windows were big. It was quiet. That was the selling point for me, the silence. The street outside was a dead end, bordered by a dense patch of woods. It felt isolated but peaceful. I signed the papers the next day. The first 2 weeks were blissfully boring. I spent my days painting over the yellowed wallpaper and my nights unpacking boxes. I'm a rational guy. I don't believe in ghosts, and I don't get scared easily. When I heard the first noise, I didn't think haunting. I thought plumbing. It started on a Tuesday night. I had just turned off the lamp on my nightstand. The room plunged into darkness, and the silence of the countryside settled in. About 5 minutes later, I heard it. A low, dull vibration. It sounded like a heavy truck idling outside, maybe 2 streets over. I ignored it and rolled over. But the sound didn't fade. It was constant. The next night, it was louder. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a sensation. I could feel it in my teeth. A subtle buzzing, like when you stand too close to a high-voltage transformer. I sat up in bed, straining my ears. It seemed to be coming from the floorboards. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out. The street was empty. No idling trucks. No construction crews. Just the empty road and the dark line of trees swaying in the wind. I went downstairs to the kitchen. The fridge was humming, sure, but that was a familiar mechanical whir. This was different. This was deeper. I put my hand on the kitchen wall. It was vibrating. It was faint, but it was there. A steady, rhythmic pulse. Thrum, thrum. I went to the basement immediately. That's where the furnace and the water heater were. I figured a belt was loose or a motor was dying. But when I got down there, the basement was dead silent. The furnace was off. The water heater was quiet. The vibration wasn't coming from the utilities. In fact, standing in the center of the basement, I couldn't hear the hum at all. That was the first red flag. The sound was louder upstairs in the bedroom than it was down here near the machinery. I went back upstairs, feeling a little uneasy. I told myself it was just acoustic resonance, sound waves from the highway miles away, bouncing weirdly off the hills. I put in earplugs and managed to fall asleep. Things escalated a week later. I was in the living room watching a movie. I paused the TV to go to the kitchen, and the moment the audio cut out, the house filled the void. The hum was significantly louder now. It wasn't just a background noise. It felt oppressive, like the air pressure in the room had dropped. I decided to run a test. I went to the main breaker panel in the hallway and flipped the master switch. The house went pitch black. The refrigerator stopped. The router lights died. The digital clock on the stove went blank. The hum didn't stop. It got clearer. Without the interference of modern electronics, the sound took on a texture I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't a mechanical drone. It fluctuated. It had a cadence. It sounded like air being forced through a narrow tunnel, or breathing. Giant, slow, raspy breathing coming from inside the walls. I stood there in the dark hallway, my hand still on the breaker box, freezing cold. The sound seemed to be surrounding me. I remember pressing my ear against the drywall in the hallway. The vibration was intense enough that it tickled my skin. I jerked my head back. For a split second, I could have sworn the pattern changed the moment my ear touched the wall. It stuttered like a skipped beat before resuming its rhythm. I wish I hadn't gone back to check. I grabbed a heavy-duty flashlight from the kitchen drawer and spent the next hour walking the perimeter of the house outside. I checked the foundation, I checked the vents. Nothing. The crawl space under the porch was empty, save for some dry leaves. When I went back inside, the atmosphere had shifted. You know that feeling when you walk into a room where two people have just stopped arguing? The air felt thick, heavy. I turned the power back on, and the lights flooded the hallway. But the comfort they usually brought was gone. The sleep deprivation started to get to me after that. I was waking up with migraines. My balance felt off. I read online that infrasound, sound waves below the frequency of human hearing, can cause nausea, anxiety, and hallucinations. I convinced myself that's what it was. Maybe there was a natural gas pipeline nearby causing vibrations, or wind hitting the chimney at a specific angle. I called a contractor friend of mine, David, to come take a look. I didn't tell him about the breathing aspect. I just told him I thought the house had a structural vibration issue. David came over on a Saturday afternoon. Of course, during the day, with the sun shining and birds chirping, the house felt normal. We walked through every room. He checked the attic, the basement, the pipes. "I don't hear anything, man," David said, wiping dust off his hands. "Place is solid as a rock. You sure it's not tinnitus? You work on computers all day. Maybe you need to get your ears checked." "It happens at night," I insisted. "It's when everything gets quiet." David laughed, patting me on the shoulder. "Old houses make noise. Wood expands and contract. Don't let it spook you." He left around 4 p.m. I felt foolish. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just lonely and stressed, and my brain was manufacturing a problem to solve. That night, I decided to ignore it. I took a sleeping pill, put on noise-canceling headphones, and went to bed early. I drifted off quickly, wrapped in an artificial silence. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. I didn't wake up groggy. I woke up wide awake, heart hammering against my ribs. I pulled the headphones off. The hum was deafening. It wasn't just a sound anymore. The glass of water on my nightstand was rippling. Tiny concentric circles radiated from the center of the glass. The loose change on the dresser was rattling, a tiny metallic chatter, chick-chick-chick. I sat up, paralyzed. The sound was coming from everywhere, but it felt focused. It felt like it was directed at me. And then I heard something else underneath the hum. It was a scratch. It came from the corner of the room near the closet door. It sounded like fingernails slowly dragging down the painted drywall. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I grabbed the flashlight I kept by the bed and shined it at the corner. Nothing, just the white paint and the baseboards. But the scratching continued, louder now, responding to the light. It stopped when the beam hit the wall and started again the second I moved the light away. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing my keys and phone. I didn't even put on shoes. I ran downstairs, the floorboards vibrating under my bare feet like the skin of a drum. As I reached the front door, the hum rose in pitch, transforming into a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. I tore the door open and sprinted to my car. I spent the rest of the night in a motel parking lot 3 miles away. The next morning, the sun was bright, and the fear from the night before felt distant, almost dreamlike. I sat in my car, drinking cold coffee, telling myself I had overreacted. It was just a panic attack. The scratching was probably a mouse. The vibration was, well, I still couldn't explain the vibration. I went back to the house at noon. I had to pack a bag. I wasn't going to sleep there again until I figured this out. When I walked inside, the house was silent. I went upstairs to grab some clothes.
That's when I noticed the wall in the bedroom. In the corner where I had heard the scratching, the paint was cracked. Not just a hairline fracture, but long, vertical fissures running from the ceiling to the floor. It looked like the drywall had been pushed from the inside. I stared at it, my stomach dropping. I stepped closer. The cracks were rhythmic, spaced out like the bars of a cage. I put my hand near the wall, not touching it. I could feel heat radiating from it. The drywall was warm to the touch, almost feverish. I should have left then. I should have grabbed my bag and run. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I went to the garage and grabbed a hammer and a pry bar. I needed to see what was behind that wall. There was no plumbing in that part of the house, no electrical risers. It should have been just studs and insulation. I went back to the bedroom. The silence was heavy now, expectant. I swung the hammer. The drywall crumbled easily. I tore away a chunk, creating a hole about the size of a dinner plate. A smell hit me instantly. Stale, trapped air, mixed with the sharp scent of ozone and something metallic, like old copper coins. I shined my flashlight into the hole. There was a space behind the wall. It wasn't just studs. There was a gap of about 3 feet between the bedroom wall and the exterior siding. A hidden void that wasn't on the floor plan. I widened the hole, ripping down sheets of drywall until I could see inside. The space was empty mostly. No pipes, no wires. But the studs, the wooden beams that held the house up, were covered in markings. Someone had carved into the wood. Thousands of tiny, jagged lines. They looked frantic. As I leaned in closer, I realized they weren't random. They were tally marks. Row after row of them, carved so deep they had splintered the wood. And in the center of the void, sitting on the floorboards between the studs, was a chair. It was a simple wooden chair facing the back of my bedroom wall, facing the exact spot where my bed was on the other side. On the seat of the chair sat a small black box. It looked like an old transistor radio, but modified. Wires were protruding from it, drilled directly into the floor. I reached out and grabbed the box. It was heavy. It was also warm. As soon as I touched it, the hum started. It didn't ramp up this time. It hit me like a physical blow, a blast of sound so loud my vision blurred. It wasn't coming from the box. The box was just the trigger. The sound was coming from below. The floorboards beneath my feet groaned. The entire house shuddered. I dropped the box and scrambled back, falling onto the bedroom floor. The hole I had made in the wall seemed to inhale. The air rushed past me, sucking into the void. And then, from the darkness of that hidden space, the voice came. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a recording. It was a mimicry. It was my voice. "David, David," it whispered, perfectly replicating the tone I had used when talking to my friend. Then it shifted. It made the sound of my car keys jingling. It made the sound of my breathing as I slept. It played back the sounds of my life in that house, overlapping them, speeding them up until they blurred into a chaotic, screaming cacophony. My cough, my footsteps, the sound of me brushing my teeth. The house hadn't just been making noise. It had been listening. It had been learning. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I didn't care about the chair or the box or the tally marks. I scrambled to my feet and ran. The hallway felt longer than it should have been. The walls seemed to bow inward, pulsing with that stolen sound. The floor rolled like the deck of a ship in a storm. I burst out the front door and didn't stop running until I was in my car. I peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching, leaving the front door wide open. I never went back, not even to get my clothes. I hired a company to clear out the house. I told them to dump everything. I put the house back on the market the next week, listing it for half of what I paid. I didn't care about the money. I just needed my name off the deed. It sold to an investment firm that flips rental properties. I pity whoever rents it next. I live in the city now, in a loud apartment complex right next to a train station. The trains rattle my windows every 20 minutes. The sirens never stop. The neighbors are loud. I love it. I love the noise. But sometimes, late at night, when the trains stop running and the city holds its breath for just a second, I catch myself listening. I'll be lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and I'll hear it. A low, faint vibration, a hum that matches the rhythm of my own blood. And I wonder if it's just a memory, or if sound waves never really die. I wonder if that house is still out there, humming in the dark, replaying the sounds of my panic to an empty room, waiting for someone new to listen. Even now, sitting here typing this, I can feel a vibration in the floor. It's probably just the refrigerator. Probably.